Hello and welcome to Our Game with myself, Shane Stapleton, joined every week during the championship here by Richie Power and Kieran Carey, two of the legends of the game. Lads, great to have you on board. Just to remind everyone, the first 15 minutes of the show will be fully available everywhere, and then after that, you'll have to go to patreon.com/OurGame. Do you know what? I want to jump straight into Limerick, Kieran, because I had a friend who messaged me this morning. And he says, and this is obviously in the context of a fairly average league for Limerick and all these talk of injuries. And he goes, wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall in the Limerick dressing room the past few weeks? Imagine a group of the best assembled athletes ever to pick up a hurley training and getting fueled by media and the general public suddenly turning on them for their success. How pissed off they are now. Imagine Will O'Donoghue and what he's going to do to the next lad that runs at him. They're going to hammer all around him this year again. What do you think about where Limerick are at going into the championship this weekend and facing Cork?
I certainly wouldn't be falling into that trail of thought now, to be fair, and I suppose the one thing outside of gaining the bit of success they have for the last number of years, I suppose the big one really is, experience. And I suppose when the pressure is on, to keep the cool heads. And yeah, listen, their league form has showed, watch them the last 4 or 5 years, that they were a bit rattled.
Having a small bit of a drop there off Kieran's. Richie, would you take up that point? You've obviously been there on a team that's dominated over the years, and you've probably had maybe that feeling of people talking about how someone else is going to take over. You're not quite where you had been. What would you think of that sort of message and that sort of feeling that Limerick would have going into this championship?
I suppose, Shane, listen, look, that's probably what's on everyone's lips at the moment is where are Limerick at the moment. You look at their league form, they did a fierce poor start, but they finished strong. And to be honest, I kind of expected as much. I think that they were probably a good 4 to 6 weeks behind everyone else. They had their team holiday, I think, the end of December or around that time. And, I didn't expect them to have a good run in the league, to be honest. But look, I don't think they're going to be too worried down there. They've been the best team in the country for, you could say, the last 4 years. And I think, everyone is talking about Waterford now at the moment and the Cork, but have they really shown enough credentials to say that they can knock Limerick off their perch? I don't think so. And I think Limerick are in a fierce strong position going into the championship. I think, as you said, people are starting to question them where they're at, but I think John Cahill will be delighted, to be honest, because he's had his players together for the last, 6 weeks since they played a league game, maybe. And that's super preparation to go into a championship, and especially going to Páirc Uí Chaoimh, on Sunday. So, look, I wouldn't read into much of that at all. I think we're going to see the real Limerick on Sunday.
What sort of a game do you expect, Richie? Because part of me was thinking, the really high, I don't know if you watch too much soccer, but Liverpool against Man City was almost stressful to watch last week because the teams were just high pressing in each other's faces. And I wonder, do you think that these two teams will be in each other's faces with the puck outs, or will they kind of be dropping off each other, almost thinking, well, Cork, we're not going to give up the full back line like we did last year and throw them to the wolves?
Yeah, look, I think Cork, seriously probably have to have a look at their game plan with regards to last year's All-Ireland, Shane. They can't go and try and play their own game against this Limerick team, and I think they would have learned the lesson from last year. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of game plan Cork bring to the game on Sunday. But I don't think Limerick are going to do anything different, to be honest. They're going to set up like they've set up over the past couple of seasons. But I do think they're going to bring a massive, massive intensity to this game on Sunday. As I said, it's a huge game for both teams. And, whoever loses this game on Sunday is under serious pressure for the rest of the championship, because realistically you have to win your last 3 games to qualify. So, it's a massive, massive game, and it's no different to any other teams this weekend that are playing the first round of the championships. If you lose your first game, you're putting serious pressure on yourself going forward in the championship. But definitely it's going to be very, very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how Cork play. Will they continue to play the running game? Personally, I wouldn't be inclined to try and play it through, a half forward line of Garrod Hegarty, Tom Morrissey. These guys, they're going to have to start playing the long ball to try and avoid coming into contact with these guys, because, no team in the country can compete with the Limerick physicality. So it's going to be very, very interesting. And as I said, it's do or die for both teams, because Munster's so competitive. I certainly wouldn't like to be going into the last 3 games and Munster having to get a result in all 3 games.
It's interesting. I saw some stats put up about those puckouts, and you were talking about the short ones. This is an interesting enough one. This was some statistics from GA Insights, and this is in 2021. The scores originating from short puckouts. That Cork got 25% of those from going short puckouts. Then Wexford 20%. So obviously that was under Davy Fitz in his final year. Antrim 14%. Limerick, I actually thought Limerick would have more from their short puckouts than 10%. Waterford 9%. That's absolutely flown up again this year, and I'll come to some stats on that in a while. Tip 8%, and you can see Kilkenny just 5%, but we'll probably come to Kilkenny later on and talk about how they're maybe readjusting this year. But for Cork, in some ways, if they're getting a bit of joy out of that and going short, do they nearly have to persist with it and hopefully to, I don't know, fail better this year at a minimum, and obviously hope to beat the likes of Limerick?
Well, yeah, look, I suppose that 25%, Shane, is probably made up of, their Munster Championship games and obviously the semi-final against Kilkenny, because they had great success against Kilkenny in the semi-final with their short puckouts. But, I suppose you have to prepare differently for different teams, and certainly every team in the country has to prepare differently for Limerick. It's no different to when we were winning All Irelands or Tipperary as well. You always had to prepare differently for certain teams, and Cork have to have a different game plan going into this game on Sunday, because no difference, physicality wise, this Limerick team are up there with there's the strongest, the most physical, the most powerful teams that have ever probably played the game. So trying to play through these guys, in my opinion, is a recipe for disaster. And Cork have enough good, fast, nippy forwards, and Páirc Uí Chaoimh is a big field. So I think they're going to have to try and isolate the space and try and get ball in front of the likes of Patrick Horgan, the Conor Leahans, and take on the Limerick defence, because I do think that this Limerick defence can be got at, but it all depends on whether they can bypass that middle third, and if you can get that ball into a full forward line that's willing to take on their men, I think there's goals there for Cork. But again, it all comes from what game plan Kieran Kingston and his selectors come with on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Kieran is just trying to go onto another device, so hopefully he'll be right soon. And obviously for the rest of the show here, Richie, I'm going to bring up the 2 teams, the probable teams that will start at the weekend. Obviously, we're not entirely sure just yet. And I've looked at a Cork backline now, and this is speaking to Cork people as well, that and Niall O'Leary is a bit of an injury concern, but Niall O'Leary, Damien Cahill, which would be a change from Rob Downey last year in the final. He's played in wing back sometimes in the league this year. Sean O'Donoghue, who's done quite well, obviously, anytime he's played pretty much. Tim O'Mahony, Mark Coleman, and Kieran Joyce. Now, they mightn't necessarily line out exactly like that, but if you look at that team, and hopefully you can see that clearly enough there, and I'm going to guess that Ger Millerick is going to drop in and man-mark Cian Lynch. Do you look at that Cork backline and think there's frailties there, or how would you view it?
No, I wouldn't think frailties. I suppose looking at the full back line, I suppose personally, Damien Cahill, for me, would be somewhere that Limerick probably could get a bit of joy out of if they try and isolate him on the edge of the square. Robert Downey, I'm surprised that he's not going to be, I suppose in the number 2 to 7, but
maybe he will now. That's
yeah, but after a great year last year, I don't know. Personally, I just feel that Cork are a stronger unit as a backline, without Damien Cahill, and that's just my own opinion. But certainly Tim O'Mahony and Joyce, Kieran Joyce, sorry, 2 strong men. My only fear with Tim O'Mahony is he likes to go forward. He likes to rush forward on these long solo runs, and he's got on the end of a couple of big scores for Cork over the last during the league and even last year. But defence wise, I think Cork have to be rock solid on Sunday, and especially around that half back line. You're going to have Mark Coleman sweeping in behind that defence, which is his normal game. And Ger Millerick, as you said, will pick up Cian Lynch. So, if they can get Mark Coleman on the ball, and if he can sweep across, onto the breaking ball, I'd give Cork a serious chance. But again, they just have to be very, very, together as a group, defending for each other. running off the shoulder as well. If they are going to go with the running game, rather than bringing the ball into the tackle, try and avoid it, trying to go around it, and then deliver the ball. But certainly, look, Cork were probably the form team in the league behind Waterford, so they are bringing form into the championship, which I'm sure they'll take great confidence from as well.
I saw some great stats from Sean Flynn. He was the former statsman for Tipperary, and he was talking about the influence of Cian Lynch. And obviously, Kieran knows that as well as anybody. But in the 3 games that Limerick played Cork last year, by a mile, he had the most shot involvements. He was involved in 38 shot involvements over 3 games, and 35 of them returned scores. The next was Galan with 22 shot involvements and 14 scored. Now, how much, and tell us from a Kilkenny point of view over the years, how much can you base a game plan around one guy only and saying, no matter who beats us, it's not going to be Cian Lynch?
Yeah, I suppose the big thing there, as you said, was against Cork, Shane. Cork play with the sweeper and they play with Mark Coleman sitting off Cian Lynch, obviously, and then, Ger Mellerick sitting back as a centre back. I'm not sure if centre back is Ger Mellerick's position. Does he play there for his club? Is he a midfielder coming back trying to just fill a gap or fill a hole? Personally, I would go, man for man, on Cian Lynch. I'd pick someone to man mark him, whether he goes to midfield, half forward, centre forward, corner forward, full forward. I'd pick one man to follow him for the day. And I suppose, if you have someone sitting back in the pocket who's not actually picked centre back, is Ger Mellerick's mind and is his game solely on marking Cian Lynch, or is he kind of is there a part of him thinking that he has to keep an eye on his man in the middle of the field as well, or does he have to do a little bit more hurling? And if that happens, it allows Cian Lynch to get into these pockets and get into this space. But if you just go with someone that's like the likes of Niall O'Leary, the cornerback, he is a savage man marker. Again, is he someone that could play centre back? I'm not so sure, but for me, I think Cian Lynch is the go-to man for Limerick, and you have to pick one man to pick Cian Lynch up no matter where he goes. Live in his shorts for the 70 minutes and just concentrate on marking Cian Lynch. Just forget about the rest of your game, but just on knowing where Cian Lynch is at all times, because if Cian Lynch gets into this game on Sunday, Cork are going to be under serious pressure because he just makes everything click for Limerick.
Yeah, and obviously Limerick are so clever on the sideline. Kylie Kinnerk and the rest of their backroom team. Like a couple of years ago, Tipperary had put Alan Flynn on Cian Lynch in the league. He did quite well, and then they decided that was at midfield. But then they decided to move him centre forward. And like you said, was he as comfortable there? Last year in the Munster Championship game between these two teams, Cork and Limerick, Ger Millerick was doing a great job on Lynch. But then there was that black card, I think, to Peter Casey. Then Niall O'Leary ended up on him for a while at centre back area and kind of struggled on him. So I definitely take your point there. I think it's so important to make sure you have to pick someone who's comfortable in that position. But then you'd possibly say there's not too many of those Cork backs who like defending first. Sean O'Donoghue is probably their main man when it comes to defending first, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe it is the likes of Sean O'Donoghue. And my thinking around this, Shane, would be you look at Waterford. I think Waterford have prepared this year, looking at a Limerick team. They've gone back with Jack Fagan wing back, who in my opinion is, just set down to mark Garrod Hegarty when the two sides clash. So you have to, I suppose in a way you can say it's horses for courses or something like that. But definitely I think it's something that Cork needs to look at. Now I know they don't like going down the road of man marking. Cork never have. In order to try and get one over on this Limerick team, Kinch is for me one of the guys that they need to try and tie down. If you can keep Cian Lynch quiet, I think it restricts Limerick's scoring power, and I suppose the guy that kind of creates everything, keeps him quiet as well. So it makes things very, very on Limerick then.
Yeah, absolutely. Kieran, hopefully you can hear us loud and clear this time.
My apologies. My IT wouldn't be the best now, but I think I'm up and going now. Sorry about that.
You must have clicked in with a Nokia 3210, did you?
I'd say worse again, probably the Motorola, the Bricket one when it first came out.
Oh, the Triumph Geo. I think I know it well. I had it in first year of college. So we were just talking about obviously the influence of your nephew Cian Lynch and how good he is. And in the 3 games last year, he by a mile had the most shot involvements in the Cork Limerick games, 38, 35 scores off that. The next was Aaron Gallan with 22 involvements, 14 scores in terms of shots. How much do you think Cork can just say, as I was just asking Richie, if one thing happens on Sunday, we're not going to let Cian Lynch be the guy to beat us?
Yeah, I suppose if you're going to be earmarking players, right, and the Limerick's team from the opposition, like you'll be counting up to about 10. Right, and I suppose they have a lot of them, and I suppose trying to kind of babysit them all on the one day is the big one here. And Cork played Limerick twice last year, the first round and in the final. They got a lot of joy from Limerick the first half. I think they did very well. The second half, then actually, Limerick just overpowered them. And we were talking about the league form, and I suppose the old mentality, the league form goes out the window Sunday. The big one for me really, have Cork really improved enough since last year? Like, Richie would know, coming off the field, losing an All-Ireland final is bad enough. But coming off the field, receiving a serious hiding like that, that has to be hurtful, it has to be sore. And, I'm not saying they're going to use that, but that has to be planted in the back of their mind at some stage, Sunday. So, obviously, trying to keep Cian Lynch quiet is going to be a big one. I would have said last year, whatever team keeps him quiet, they have a great chance. But if you keep him quiet, Hegarty could explode, Tom Morrissey could explode, Aaron Gallan could explode. Okay, Flanagan is injured, Cahill O'Neill could explode. But I suppose, that's one side of it. But Cork as a team, I suppose they have to worry. They've probably have to put more of their interest in probably their defence. Because I think if they get the defence right, they have a team that's capable of hurting anybody, but they're probably struggling a small bit defence-wise. And unfortunately, if you're going to struggle defence-wise against Limerick, Limerick are going to hurt you.
Is there any one player that you as a Limerick man would look at and think, Kieran, we really have to worry about this guy down at Páirc Uí Chaoimh on Sunday?
Cork have a few of them, to be fair. They definitely have two players there that potentially could be hurler of the year. Dara Fitzgibbon is one, Coleman is another one, Jack O'Connor on his there will take a bit of stopping. But in fairness to Limerick, I suppose traditionally for the last 4 years, they've probably been ruthlessly going about trying to implement their own game. They don't seem to be that worried about the opposition. And and if I think anything this Sunday, I think there could be a trick or two up Limerick's sleeve that Paul Kinnaird probably hasn't exposed during the league. I wouldn't rule that out because, he's very inventive. He's kind of very mathematically minded when it comes to coaching. So you were saying earlier on what Limerick are doing for the last 4 or 5 weeks in the Gaelic grounds. I suppose Sunday will tell the tale, and I wouldn't be surprised if they come out in a different type of a system also.
Okay, well, the remainder of the show will be available at patreon.com/OurGame, so join us there. Jump in there, Richie.
Yeah, no, I was just asking, or interested to hear Kieran's views with regards to the water breaks. Do you think they'll have any effect on Limerick this year? Because I was probably one to point it out over the last couple of seasons. Like, they used the water breaks unbelievably well, and they came out after breaks and wiped teams away. Do you think that will have any effect on them, maybe, or?
Yeah, well, watching the league campaign myself personally, I felt it had a huge bearing on it. And I suppose when you look at the water breaks, I suppose they had to implement it because of the coronavirus. That's number one. But I suppose for me watching the game, the whole flow came out of the game, and it wasn't like watching traditional hurling matches. But thankfully this year, and if you look at the standard of the games during the league, they were kind of pretty high all the way through. And I'd put that down because there was no water breaks. But you're definitely on the ball. When Limerick got that bit of time out, Paul Kinnaird was there. He was up at the screen. He was kind of getting organised. Here we go now for the second block, the third block, and the fourth block. So without a doubt, Limerick are missing that. And I think that was probably self-evident during the league campaign as well, Richie.
Do you think it could knock away a little bit of a marginal gain that Limerick have had in the last couple of seasons, because they probably are the best at tactically implementing something just in that minute or two?
Yeah, without a doubt, Shane. And as I said, okay, definitely when you look at Limerick's performance in the league, okay, they've nothing to prove in the league. They're probably trying to blood in a few players that went back training late. Okay, I take all that on board, but definitely the water breaks, without a doubt, is after probably stunting their kind of what they were used to for the last 2 to 3 years. They were in a rhythm. First 15 minutes, we do A, B, C, D. you're grouped together. This is the second block, half time, and this is our final block. Because if we look at them for the last 2 years, they finished powerfully always on the third block.
Okay. Just to show you the teams that we've kind of lined out here, Kieran, this may not necessarily be what we see on Sunday, because there's talk that Niall O'Leary might be carrying an injury. Rob Downey might start instead of Damien Cahill. But there's a lot of talk about injuries in Limerick. Now, let's say, Seamus Flanagan, there's talk that he's out. There's talk that Will O'Donoghue might be struggling. He's had very little game time since the Galway match. I believe he played a bit against Dublin recently. Keane Lynch didn't even tog out in that game. Do you think that there's the depth there in Limerick if those injuries are, they all come to pass? And also, would you throw young lads like the likes of Cahill O'Neill in front of 40,000 people at Páirc Uí Chaoimh? It'd be a big ask.
Yeah, and I suppose the big mantra really for the last number of years, Shane, if you like, is the preparation and the size of squads, right? And I suppose, a squad now is up to about 35 players, and I suppose ideally you're hoping to get about 25 players really that kind of cut the mustard at that level that you can bring on at any stage that will improve the situation. And I suppose looking back at Limerick squad in 2018, where it appeared to be a lot stronger, it probably isn't as strong now. But to answer your question with Cahill O'Neill, yeah, I'd have no fear of Cahill O'Neill. He's a thoroughbred, and I watched him coming through the system at minor and 21. Had a fairly good league campaign, and actually possibly I felt last year they probably minded him probably an extra year, but he even was ready for it last year. And I'd have no issue, even starting Cahill O'Neill, whether it's 40,000 or 80,000. He's made for it, and he's bred for it, and he'll hold his own. But going back to the injuries, and I suppose more squads now, and I suppose the one team that I've looked at this year that possibly have improved their squad hugely is Waterford. They appear to be now where they might have 7 solid subs that you could say, right, they'll come in, they'll do a job, and that you trust that will make the situation better. And I suppose Limerick mightn't have that yet, but whereas a good number of years ago they did, the Shane Dowling factor, he could come on, and I suppose they have a few players, that could be kind of rabbits out of the hat. Adam English, another guy that probably isn't a million miles away, and not too many people know about him. And I suppose if they do that, they're probably going down the Brian Cody road, which is nothing wrong with that either. They have a few, but their squad probably isn't as strong, Shane, as it was a number of years ago. But I don't think it's going to come down to the squad really. I think it's where Cork really, how they're going to set up. Number one, are they going to bring on? I suppose the bit of hurt, the bit of pain, and I suppose. If I was an inter-county player coming off the field with a trouncing like that, I'd be hibernating, and I wouldn't show my face for about a fortnight. And I suppose if they come with a bit of that, and show that they mean business in the first 10 minutes, they'll have an old chance. And then everybody's looking at where Limerick are at, or how are they? And I suppose, as Richie said there, the one team you want to play really in the first round of a championship is the team that's on the top. So I think it's a super draw for Cork, and they'll have a fair idea Sunday even where they're at themselves.
Are you confident that we'll see Championship Limerick this weekend, Kieran? Or are you a little bit like what a lot of other people, where you're thinking, geez, the league wasn't overly impressive? Or do you expect the same Limerick as last year?
Yeah, I suppose I've been extremely confident the last number of years, and I'm looking at this championship actually very different. And I suppose I'm looking at it very different for lots of reasons. And I suppose when you look at Kilkenny, when you look at Waterford, when you look at Wexford, when you look at Clare even, the amount of progression they're all after making, and Cork physically, I suppose Limerick were catching a good few teams the last number of years tactically. A lot of teams couldn't figure out what they were doing, number one. And I suppose they were probably ahead of their possibly strength and condition, number two. But I think this year it appears to be a lot more leveling playing field this year, so it's probably open for duck season really. And I suppose Limerick probably didn't help themselves because of the kind of league campaign that they had. So they're obviously showing that there's a bit of vulnerability there, there's a bit of weakness there, and opposition need to see this and hit them at their most weakest.
When you look at Patrick Horgan, he obviously he's on the road a long time. He'd be 35 in a few weeks' time. 34 in a few weeks' time. he had the ball in his hand just 5 times against Waterford. Now, that's not that necessarily down to him because Waterford overwhelmed Cork in a lot of ways during that game. Do you still see him as the same threat? I mean, last year, I think Cork were just outdone by Limerick so much that they ended up lumping high ball in. And sure, what chance does Horgan have when he's surrounded by those monsters? Do you see him being a big factor in this game?
Patrick Horgan? Oh,
Yeah.
I still would, yeah. But watching the game last year, right, and I know it's 12 months ago, like after 5 minutes, what was hitting me watching the game was really tactically what are Cork after doing. Because there was one stage there, I looked down, Kyle Hayes was going down for the ball. And actually, he could have had a cup of tea before he even rose the ball. He had that much time. So tactically, they got it very wrong. So, but if Cork have learned from that, I would give, and if they come to the party and their forwards, their big guns come, I'd give them a great chance. And Patrick Horgan still falls under that umbrella as a big gun. He's going to take serious watching because, to be fair, technically his close control is absolutely brilliant. He's probably still the best in the country with his close control and his technically his ability. I still rate him very high. So of course he's going to take watching. But there's a lot more there. There's Robbie Marley needs to come, Harmony needs to come, Jack O'Connor needs to come, and Kingston. In fairness, Kingston's after a very good league campaign. I'm pretty pleased for him because he was kind of appeared to be the black sheep up to last year. So he seems to kind of found a bit of rhythm, and he seems to kind of found a bit more comfortability playing at that level. So Cork have 6 forwards that will hurt any defence in this country. But the big one here, Shane, is they need to come to the championship big day.
And do you see do you look at the league game that happened earlier this year when Cork won by 9 points and they were the better team on the day? Are you concerned by that? Because in the 2 games that they played last year, the league game and the All-Ireland final, Limerick created 60 chances and then 56 chances, I think. This year in the league, Limerick created just 28 chances. So Cork found a real way to limit them, or was it just Limerick were going through heavy training?
Yeah, I would say a small bit of the second one, but I think Cork are probably, they've actually learned. Donald O'Grady's heavily involved with them there, so he'd be huge on watching all those small little things. And, and if Cork can try implement whatever game plan they're trying to implement and, just take the focus off of Limerick. But if there's 1 or 2 guys, as you said earlier on, Keane Lynch is obviously going to take a bit of attention, and that's fine. You must designate some fella to do that, or you don't do that. But if they implement what they're trying to achieve, and, as I said a while ago, and if 5 or 6 forwards come to the party, then I believe they have a very good chance.
Yeah. Richie, how do you see this game going?
It's for me. It's a close one to call, Shane. I suppose you're looking at Limerick, and I would have always said Limerick are the team to beat going into this year's championship, and I still believe that. But I think the one question mark is, coming off the back of a poor league game, there is talks of injuries out there. But as I said earlier in the show, I expect Limerick to put down a serious marker on Sunday. I really do think they're going to be right where they want to be on Sunday, and I said it during the week at home. I expect Limerick to lay down a marker on Sunday.
Yeah, and I suppose I need to be consistent. I would have been a lot more confident in the last number of years, and I suppose what I'm seeing this year is kind of a bit new to the last 3 or 4 years. Yeah, without a doubt, it's a perfect time, to throw the gauntlet out and to say, hi, we're still the boys to be beaten this year. I fully expect that machine mentality to come, but I think it probably could end up a bit tighter than what people think. But obviously, I would be hoping Limerick drive on, as Richie said, and please God, jump the fence about 4 or 5 points. And but I think it could be close.
Yeah. How many of these injuries are actually legit, Kieran?
Now, Shane, you should know me now. It is like the film The Green Mile. What you hear in the mile stays in the mile.
Well, I would have been slaughtered if I didn't at least ask you. But to me, that's one of the massive things here. We nearly need to see the Limerick team that lines out on the day. I think Cork have a better chance of beating Limerick if it's a full-strength Limerick in the championship this year. But I still think Waterford would beat Cork. So I find it very hard to kind of choose the rankings overall this year. I'm going to go for a Cork win here, but I could end up with massive egg in my face. And I don't back against Limerick getting it right before the end of the season, and I still have them as number 1 to win the All-Ireland. But Waterford against Tipperary this weekend, I feel like I'm going to have my grave danced on here a little bit, Kieran. Tipperary aren't looking like great shakes at the moment, but Waterford are highly impressive.
No, yeah, but Tip, I think in one particular game, actually, there you could see now, in fairness, what Colin Bonnar is trying to do. He's trying to implement a new style of game, a new type of game. That in itself is going to take a bit of time, so they could struggle there. Lost a big gun in Maher, and I think Tip are probably at a stage where they're rebuilding, and they're probably the only team out there presently that probably you'd say, yeah, they're kind of struggling a bit. But if you look at all of the rest of the inter-county teams, what I said a while ago about I lived in playing field, they all appear to be, have done serious amount of strength and conditioning in the last 12 months. They're bigger men. And the big one for me really is, what Limerick have been doing the last 3 or 4 years tactically with the puck outs and the type of game they're playing. The rest of the county teams appear to be at it now. And I suppose I'd have to mention, probably, in my opinion, probably the darkest horse this year for me would be Kilkenny. Now, Kilkenny struggled the last number of years with the type of hurling and the tempo, but they seem to have it now, and the old Kilkenny is backing it. So I'm watching Kilkenny, and I think they potentially could be very good. They were very unlucky last year against Cork. It was an outstanding match, probably one of the best matches last season against Cork, and they weren't too far away from it. And but you'd obviously have to kind of look at Waterford. Everybody's talking about them; they're league champions. And in fairness to Liam Cahill, he has been in the wrong side of a few beatings from Limerick as well. They've obviously learned to have a few brilliant hurlers running through their team. I suppose the big one for me actually is their half back line, is their launching pad now. The three of them, you bring the three in for war tomorrow morning. It's better they're getting, and it's hard to look beyond Waterford, to be fair, for that one.
Yeah, you make a great point about all the other teams starting to work the ball out from the back. Hurler and the Ditch had a great stat about Waterford, and last year against Tipperary in the quarterfinal, they had just 7 short puckouts in the whole game, whereas in the league final against Cork, they had 31. So their possession or percentage going up short just went through the roof altogether. Do you agree with that point, Richie, about other teams embracing what Limerick did, and particularly the point where Kieran is talking about the improvement in Kilkenny?
Yeah, absolutely, and I suppose, look, Shane, you have to, you kind of top of the table, and see the way that they're playing, and try and, I suppose, in a way, copy their style and bring it to their level. So, look, I'm not one bit surprised to see those stats with Waterford. They're very much possession gamed, and Kilkenny very much the same. Funnily enough, Kilkenny won the league, I think, 3 or 4 seasons ago, playing the short passing game out of defence, and done it very, very well in the league. But for whatever reason, they resorted back to their old style and come the championship. So, I would like to see it from a Kilkenny point of view. They've started to go with, a lot more youth, a lot more legs in the team, to try and get, I suppose, be able to cover the ground. So I think definitely, Kieran is right. Kilkenny, I would have said at the start of the season, I wouldn't have had them maybe in the top 4, but looking at the league form, I'd give them a serious chance of winning the Leinster championship, and if they do that, they're only 17 minutes on, and so it's going to be very, very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, Kieran, I know you're not really a man who likes to hype things up to the last, but if you look at the Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp thing last week, it was just absolutely everywhere. And if it was in soccer, Liam Cahill coming to face against his native county that he decided not to take over the job, this would be the biggest job in town. How has it stayed so quiet?
I'd say it's stayed so quiet. To be fair to Liam Cahill, he's gone about his business extremely quiet. He got a few lessons down in Waterford, has improved them hugely, made a few big calls gone in there, and and I suppose from a manager and a court's point of view, and Richie would probably identify with this. When you step away from the game of hurling, nothing really replaces that. And I suppose the only thing that kind of comes close when you're coaching and training a team and you're trying to get them to implement what you want them to do, that's probably the closest you get when you're sitting back and saying, lovely, it's working, right? And that appears to be Liam Cahill where he's at now, because he has them humming, he has them singing. Now, to be fair, okay, listen, I'd imagine, the Tipperary job when it was going up at the time, and in fairness to him, he was committed to Waterford, showed an awful lot of loyalty, and he's reaping the rewards for it now, be fair. So I wouldn't see that as an issue with Liam Cahill. If anything, he'd probably use it quietly within himself for a small bit of motivation, if anything.
From your point of view, what you make of the tactical setups of the two teams here, I'm going to bring them up on screen. So, look, this is what I think could end up happening. I'm not sure if you'd agree or disagree. Some of the selections may change. But in terms of how this is panning out, Austin Gleeson will probably come in and play somewhere in the half-forward line. You have Stephen Bennett on the inside line with Desi Hutchinson. I mean, even if you're to build off the three of those, what a selection of players in there. Jack Prendergast often comes out around the middle. Patrick Kearns really seemed to have found a role in the half-forward line, and Neil Montgomery's pace. We saw it against Cork and how he set up that goal. When you look at that Waterford forward line, what a fantastic balance in there, Kieran.
Yeah, brilliant, Shane. And not only that now, right? Not only that, but like, funny enough, I saw about 3 years ago, I maintained, that like Waterford at that particular time, and they're probably showing it now, probably pound for pound, probably nearly had the best hurlers, for want of a better word, running through every line. And I suppose the biggest difficulty that we're having really, I suppose, was finding a system that you could utilise that with the type of talent, with the type of squad and the type of skill that they had up front. Because, it's up front where they're really going to kind of hurt teams, not only in scoring, but creating and making space. And I think at this stage, in the fairness to Liam Cahill and the Waterford team, because I would have been hard on them a few times in the past, they're seen to have it kind of nailed now. So whatever team that they face this year, and I suppose the big one really will be for Waterford, especially in the big days going out, will they maintain their emotional composure no matter the size of the game? And if they can maintain that, Shane, they're there with a great chance. I just want to make another point. I suppose when you're looking at the All-Irelands in the last 2 to 3 years, I suppose you're picking Kilkenny, you're picking Limerick, you're throwing Galway in there, and you might throw Cork in there. But now there's a possibility of 4 or 5 serious contenders. You have Limerick, you have Cork, you have Galway, you have possibly Kilkenny, and to be fair, another county that we haven't mentioned yet. Well, you might have had when I lost my IT earlier on, like Wexford have also improved a nice bit. So you've definitely 4 serious contenders, if not probably 5. So that's a huge change in the last few years, Shane.
Oh, absolutely. And there was a period of time then, even 10 years ago, it was just Tip and Kilkenny, and that was it. Yeah. And it was probably quite boring for a lot of people outside of those two counties. Now, can I bring up the Tipperary team here? Again, maybe John McGrath won't play, maybe Noel McGrath will play, maybe someone else will play that we currently aren't considering. But if I look at this Tip team, right, and Dan McCormick's a very seasoned player, didn't play against Limerick a couple of years ago. That obviously turned out to be a disastrous decision. Barry Heffernan, I'd rather him in the half back line, but look, he's been playing midfield. I think maybe Barrett will follow out Prendergast, but then that's leaving 2 novices in Quigley and Morgan on the inside line. But there's a nice bit of flexibility there, so there are options from Colin Bonnar. But it's the forward line that I want to talk about. And this perception a couple of years ago that maybe Tip were an older team and, maybe they had too many lads with miles on the clock on the field. But now, Conor Bowe, serious athlete. Michael Breen, serious athlete. Jake Morris, one of the fastest players in the game. Mark Keogh, great little athlete who will go at you. John McGrath's form hasn't been great the past couple of years, but he, I'm expecting him to actually come out and try and crowd out De Borca. And then Jason Ford, if he gets space, we saw him score 6 from play in the first half last year against Limerick. So, people are maybe writing off Tip to some degree, and based on what we've seen, somewhat justifiably. But there's a lot of threat in that forward line too.
Yeah, without a doubt, Shane, to have it there. You named them out, like Jason Ford, Michael Breen, young Mark Keogh, John McGrath, Jake Morris. Like, if they come to the party Saturday evening, Tipperary have to have a huge chance. And I'll just single out Michael Breen on. I'm watching him for the last number of years now because he's a specimen of a man. And, possibly, when you see players dip their form, usually the driving force behind that is lacking a bit of confidence and a bit of self-belief in their own ability. And he's one player I kind of watch from a distance all the time, and I kind of saying, right, this fella is a machine. If he can only see the damage that he's capable of doing, and you're looking at that and you're watching from a distance. But even if they can kind of tweak and rectify a few of that, as you rightly pointed out, Tipperary have about 5 or 6 still quality hurlers. But having said that, Shane, outside of them coming to the party and hopefully, hitting their potential about 90%, they're playing a serious team in Waterford on Saturday evening, so they've had that to deal with as well. But I suppose bottom line is, Tipperary for years, you're always picking them nearly every second year. Tip, we might be there, they might be there. So they're a team that are full of pride. They love their hurling, and I suppose they're not going to go out of the championship that easy. So they're definitely going to be kicking them that we might have seen up to now.
Yeah, Richie, like just the league game a few weeks ago, Waterford won 28, Tipperary 21 points. In the last 20 minutes of the game, it was 10 points to 1. So Tipperary had been close and then just completely fell off in the latter stage of the game. Do you think a team can turn it around that quickly? Liam Cahill's in year 3, but Colin Bonnar is trying to turn it around. He doesn't have Seamus Callanan. Bubbles is injured and out for the year. Brendan Maher's gone. Pádraig Maher's gone. But do you give him a chance of turning this around?
Absolutely, Shane. You have to give him a chance to turn it around. And again, I was talking about this during the week. You go back over the last 10, 15 years, any day that Tipperary go out to play Waterford, no matter what result they're coming off the back of, no matter what kind of league campaign they're coming off the back of, they are a serious outfit, and they'll fancy themselves of turning Waterford over, without a shadow of a doubt. And that's going to be the interesting thing about it. Waterford going into the game with savage pressure on them as well, and I think it's a long time since Waterford have felt this kind of pressure going into a championship, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see how they deal with that. As I said, we're next door neighbours to them here. There's an awful lot of talk coming out of Waterford that this could be their year. So, how they manage that in a packed Walsh Park on Sunday is going to be very interesting. And believe me, I believe there's a kick in Tipperary. And by all accounts, training has gone very, very well over the last 6 to 8 weeks as well. So I'm looking forward to that game too. I'm looking forward to, how Waterford deal with the pressure of being, probably themselves and Limerick are the two favourites for the All Ireland this year. And as I said, it's been a long time since Waterford have been in that position.
Yeah, and so
Shane, can I come in for 1 second? I met Dan Shannon there a fortnight ago down in Kerry. We were chatting, and he said to me, "What kind of a chance do you seriously give Waterford the coming season?" And similar to what Richie is saying there, and it's new territory to them. If they can carry the mantle or the cross of the pressure that's on them at the moment, they have a great chance. But I suppose the jury is still out on that, and only time will tell. But if they can kind of carry that emotions that goes with the pressure of kind of the tags on, your favourites, then they're there with a great chance. But only time will tell. I suppose this season will tell, can they carry that expectation? Can they carry that pressure?
Yeah, Richie,
Sorry, Shane. If Tipperary were to turn Waterford over on Sunday, well, then you're going to really see what Waterford are made of for the rest of the Munster Championship. Because is it a case that the bubble will burst and they'll go back to their old ways? So, that's what I'm really looking forward to, is if Waterford can carry the form in, get the results Sunday that they need. But if it was to go the other way, then we'll really see what Waterford are made of.
Yeah, I think, again, referring to that Sean Flynn piece that he wrote there this week, he was talking about Tipperary's problem with, dealing with the sharp puck out, and that, it's grand to sit off and sit out to the 45. And I saw Clare do this against Limerick, and I think Wexford also did it to Limerick. Did it quite well because they were able to engage then around the middle area. But Tipperary, they dropped off. But once the ball came in through the middle, they weren't actually able to get that pressure to win turnovers against Waterford in the league. Do you see Tipperary being able to do that, Richie? Because time and time again in the past year or two, Waterford have been able to run straight up the guts of Tipperary, and Tip haven't been able to live with them.
Yeah, it's funny, Shane. It all goes back to legs, and having legs all over the field that's able to cover the ground and that's able to plug these holes that when they are opened, and I suppose you look at Tipperary. You have the Ronan Mars and these guys, but really, is he able to cover the ground that's needed, in a central position maybe? But it is going to be very interesting. A lot of it comes from hunger as well, as Kieran had, he'd allude to that as well. Hunger drives this, fitness levels, and obviously then having legs all over the field. So will Tipperary be able to do it? I don't know. It all depends if they do enter, some fresh legs and some fresh faces, because if they do that, you have guys going out onto the field wanting to prove themselves, having to prove themselves, you know, and no better position to do that than the first round of the Munster Championship. So, listen, no different to Limerick. Tipperary know what Waterford are going to bring on Sunday. You know, they're not going to go away from their game plan. You know, whether things are going for them or whether things are going against them, Waterford don't deploy from their game plan the exact same as Limerick. So Tipperary need to have a game plan for Waterford. And if they do, I'd give them a serious chance. You know, all you have to do is look back over the league campaign, look back at Waterford's game. You have a fair idea of how they're going to set up and what way they're going to play. So whether Colin Bonnar and his selectors have had enough time to, which they have, you know, to put a plan in place, it's going to be very, very interesting to see.
Yeah, in his final 4 years over the Tip underage teams, Liam Cahill's teams scored 47 championship goals, which is, you know, something else. For a long period, Waterford were struggling for goals. In the 14 games between 2014 and 17, they scored just 13. And I remember doing a stat at the time, and Seamus Callanan had scored 16 on his own during that period. But they've had 22 goals in the league this year, Kieran. Tipperary struggled for goals, and you know, the Antrim game they got 7, but other than that they scored just 1 goal in 4 games. So where can Tip, you know, are more realistic? Why do you think Waterford are able to score all these goals, and will that carry them through?
Yeah, and if you size up the goals, actually most of their goals actually is down the middle, and they're coming with waves, you know, so they know what they're doing. It isn't by accident, and I suppose, you know, they've showed in the league that they can do it, and I suppose, like Richie was right what he's saying about Tipperary, you know, and you know, Tipperary will have to come out, like, I suppose, with the old thinking, the old arrogance, meaning we've always looked after Waterford, and I suppose Sahar is going to be no different. And I suppose, Shane, when you sit back and look at it, you know, you can analyse tactics, you can go about the sharp puck out, leave this fella loose, he's fine. But Shane, if you admire most teams or most players, they're going to hurt you and do damage to you. And bottom line is, you know, it'll have to be kind of in their face hurling, not to be looking at them or admire them, because if they do stand back and admire them, Waterford are going to hurt them. But as Richie said, like, Tip aren't going to do that. I think they'll probably have to come with probably a small bit of the own mentality. We've always looked after you, and this weekend is going to be no different. So they have to come with their own bit of arrogance as well. And, you know, obviously they have to mind the house. When I say mind the house, you know, their 6 backs have to be on the ball, because, you know, we've all seen what Waterford are capable of doing. They're capable of hanging 3-4 goals a game, and you know, it is up to Tipperary to make sure that doesn't happen. And you know, that won't happen. Shane talking about it, that will only happen by emptying the 2 tanks and the spare tank on the given day, and it'll probably mean 10 and 12 coming back tracking as well. So there's a lot in it.
Yeah. Well, in a word, who's going to win the game, Kieran?
I fancy Waterford for this one now.
Richie?
Yeah, I think Waterford will win it, Shane, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as people are making out.
Yeah. I feel like the same as well. I feel like Tip will always just be hanging on the coattails, but the last 10 minutes probably just pull away a little bit. Yeah. Fergus Butler is after sending in a comment on Patreon. He goes, Limerick supporter raised in County Derry here. Question for the lads. Apart from your own county, is there a county you'd like to see do well? I'll start off with you, Richie.
Apart from Kilkenny, like Tip. Look, I suppose the thing about it is everyone has been kind of looking at Waterford the last couple of seasons, and you know, they've been thereabouts. For me, they finally have a panel strong enough to win an All-Ireland. It's mentality. It's their mentality that I question. You know, you just have to look at the league semi-final, which the Austin Gleeson, I suppose, incident, you know, but things like that tend to come back at you and come back and hurt you. But certainly, look, Waterford, I think for hurling, to see Waterford win an All-Ireland would be huge.
Yeah, I agree. Kieran, any other county you'd like to see do well?
Funny enough, no, I could get Lambasted for this. I'd like to see Kilkenny come, because, you know, it took them a while to kind of struggle the last number of years with the game. They have it now, and I always had an old soft spot for I suppose, the amount of love and respect they showed for the game. I mean, there as long. Yeah, obviously I'd be similar. Waterford, really, and Kilkenny then sneaking in number 2.
Okay. Wexford against Galway this weekend. First round of the Leinster Championship. All 3 games going there. Westmeath, Kilkenny and Dublin Laois also. I'll start off with you, Richie. This is Henry Shefflin's first championship game as an inter-county manager, but it's the same for Dara Egan. And obviously very tough times for the Shefflins recently, with Paul passing away. Absolutely terrible. But he'll have to refocus for this, of course, even though it doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things, really. But how do you see this game going?
Yeah, I suppose, look, again, in the context of the championship, Shane, it's a massive game for both teams. You know, and obviously, as you alluded to there, the tragedy that Henry's had to deal with over the past couple of months and weeks with his family, you know, it really puts, you know, things into perspective. You know, and I've no doubt Henry's the sort of guy that, you know, having, I suppose, you know, grieved for a couple of weeks and you know, his love for the game will have refocused his mind and going up the road to Galway. You know, he'll have one focus for Saturday evening. You know, and again, it's funny. I would have always had Galway as the team that might be able to dethrone Limerick. You know, because of their physicality, because of the way that they play, and you know, I suppose the brilliant hurlers that they've had up there. But I suppose looking at the league, they seem to have taken a huge step back. Now, I don't know, is that because Henry, you know, has wanted to try and look at as many players as he possibly could in order to get the championship team that he wants? You know, I don't know. And then from a Wexford point of view, you look at Dar Egan, Super League campaign, won their 5 games, and then they came unstuck against Waterford in the semi-final. So, you know, it's a huge game. Wexford Park is not an easy place to go, believe me. You know, and I think that might be the one thing that could swing it in Wexford's favour Saturday evening. And if it does, you know, it puts Galway under pressure, you know, for the rest of the Leinster Championship. And I was saying it, you know, whoever loses their first championship game puts themselves under savage pressure to win the remaining games against tough sides. So for me, I think Wexford might just edge it. You know, something tells me they trained extremely hard the week leading up to the Waterford game. You know, they were very flat coming into that game. I'm not so sure the league was a huge thing on Dar Egan's mind, but you know, I might be wrong in saying that too. The air might be left out of the balloon, but yeah, I think it's the makings of a great game as well. You know, and it'll be interesting to see what team Henry picks.
Why is it so difficult to play there, Richie?
It's a very hostile. You know, a very hostile environment, you know, in a good way. You know, like I played their championship Saturday evenings down there, and the atmosphere is electric, you know, and, you know, whether you're hoping you get the weather, because if you don't, it's a game of two halves. But the Wexford crowd are just so, you know, they're so passionate about the game, and they just make it like it's, I'd very much kind of refer to the Galatasaray of soccer, you know, Istanbul, you know, it's just, and Kieran would know that as well, but it's a great place to go, absolutely. But I just think it gives the Wexford players that little bit extra, you know, if it's a really tight game. And I think it is going to be tight. I think it's going to be very, very little between the sides. And as I said, I just think coming down the stretch, if it's tight, I think Wexford might just have a little bit to get them over the line.
Yeah, Kieran, what would be the best atmosphere you ever played in? It's just what comes to mind when Richie mentions the Galatasaray there.
Best atmosphere, I suppose, Shane, really, what's coming to me, and then you put me on the spot, obviously, an All-Ireland final, because nothing obviously matches that. And I suppose, you know, we probably hadn't the same amount of people around management back in our time, so we had to negotiate a lot of stuff ourselves, meaning sports psychologists and strength and condition trainers. So we had to kind of navigate ourselves. And I suppose I got into a good habit early, irrespective of what field I was going to, or irrespective of what the title of the game was. It was still only a field, still only a match. So, and I was able to switch off whether it was 10 at the game or 30,000. So, you know, that was a kind of a skill I learned myself. And you know, but sometimes you have to be your own mythbuster. If I'm going to keep telling myself Wexford is a hard place to go, I'll probably keep believing it. So I have to slightly change it myself. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to this game. You know, I was delighted. I thought it was probably the best appointment in the last 3 years. Galway pulled the right stroke there and getting Henry. And you know, Wexford have a new manager. You know, and the league is over. And I suppose bottom line from a manager's point of view is, you know, you're putting your head in the chopping block when you have that tag as a manager, and really everything is up for grabs in the first round of the championship. That's what it's going to come down to. And funny enough, you know, and in fairness, when you look at their track record with their clubs, Obviously, Henry has a very strong track record. And, you know, I think he was probably doing a bit of experimenting in the league, getting to know the squad, getting to know the personalities, getting to know the characters, really, because inevitably it's the character and personality he wants to see coming out the field. And I believe he will have Galway right. And a bit like Richie, you know, if there was any team the last 2 or 3 years, I felt if they showed a bit of form physically and work rate, you know, you'd obviously pick Galway. They were the only team that you'd pick that could match Limerick. No, and I haven't changed that, but the only thing that I have seen is Henry is also with him now. So I'd be going slightly different to Richie. I'd be fancying Galway, but I could see it be very close.
What do you make, Kieran, of Darragh Egan bringing in Gordon Darcy, obviously rugby player, boxing coach Billy Walsh? Now, this seems to be something that Liam Sheedy, who he was part of his management team, he would always bring in the best in class, you know, have Eamon O'Shea around him and Tommy Dunn and so on and so forth. What do you make of Darragh Egan going down that route?
Yeah, I suppose it's a personal choice, number one. And, you know, I suppose for most managers, if they're doing something in a squad that no other squad is doing, it kind of looks different. But I suppose it doesn't necessarily say it's going to improve it. And I suppose when Kilkenny were at their height and when they were at their strongest, I maintained, now this wouldn't be in Brian Cody's nature and the fit, but I maintained if Brian Cody put 20 goal bollards on the field, you'd have every county doing the same thing at the time. But I suppose you have to become inventive in yourself, Shane, really, and whatever works, you know, and you know, I can't fully comment on it because I haven't tried and tested myself and I don't want to knock it. But what I am saying is just because another county isn't doing it and you're doing it, that doesn't necessarily automatically say it's a thing to do, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Richie, did you ever have any high profile people come in and chat to you during your Kilkenny years?
Not that I can remember, Shane. Do you know, there was one time we would have spoke Pádraig Harrington. We would have travelled to listen to Pádraig. Apart from that, do you know, it was very, very limited. Do you know, Jerry McEntee would have been another guy that would have, you know, helped us out a good bit back then. But other than that, it was pretty much the four walls of the dressing room and Brian and the lads and the players themselves. So, you know, as Kieran alluded to there, you know, these things look great from the outside in, but unless the players are getting something from it, you know, and really taken from it, you know, does it work? I'm not so sure. But I suppose you have to be seen to try these things as well. And I think the big thing for Limerick or Wexford this year is that they've gone away from their old style of playing. And I think we've seen that they can attack teams. We've seen that they can score goals. We've seen that they can take on the best and beat the best. You know, and I think Darragh Egan has installed that belief in them this year that they're as good as anyone 15 on 15. And yeah, if they have to go back to the defensive style of play, they can do that. But I certainly don't think they're as defensive as they used to be. And I think that will stand to them going forward. And I suppose as a spectacle, it'll make the game probably better for us on Saturday night as well.
Yeah, I had a comment in earlier saying you were probably one of the most fouled players going when you were playing for Kilkenny, Richie. And I'm thinking since, do you think, like I look at Rory O'Connor, he's actually similar enough type player to you in some ways. Would you see any similarities?
I suppose Rory was probably a bit quicker than I was, and I'm a little bit bigger than Rory, but yeah, I suppose my mentality, Shane, when I was playing was if I got the ball in my hand was to attack and go at my man. Because you can ask Kieran, the one player probably a defender doesn't like is a player that's going to run at you all day. You know, you can defend a player that's, you know, with his back to the goal, and if he's going away from the goal, it's very easy for a defender. And for, I suppose, a forward that stands still and doesn't move, you know. And I think Wexford have that, you know, like they have that in the likes of Rory O'Connor and these guys. And, you know, for me, it's a nightmare for a defender. You know, I'm involved with our own club at the moment, and it's the one thing you'd be trying to tell your forwards to do is to keep on the move, because no defender likes a forward moving. And, you know, you stand beside a corner back, that's exactly where he wants you to be, you know. But if you're on the move, he needs to be ready as well. So definitely, yeah, Rory O'Connor is a game changer without a shadow of a doubt. You know, we've seen that in the league, and if Wexford can get him on the ball enough, you know, and get Lee Chin back, I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything on Lee recently. I believe he picked up a bit of a knock in the semi-final again that has set him back maybe a couple of weeks. I don't know, but you know, if they can get him back on the field as well, it's a huge bonus to Wexford.
Okay, so any final thoughts on Galway, Ciara? Because they have tried to bring through some younger lads, and you know, in terms of the size thing, they did have that physicality over teams. I'm not entirely sure they'll have it this year, but do they have enough class with Conor Whelan, Cahill Mannion, Brian Cannon, Davy Burke may or may not start? Like, they still have some quality.
They have, yeah, and I suppose I'm kind of saying to myself, you know, if Henry got him about 3 years ago when they were down, kind of 3 years younger again, and I suppose, you know, my point here is they'd want to be making some kind of a proper shake up now, because the clock is moving. And but to answer your question, yeah, he's still serious material there. And you know, I just felt they were a small bit naive when they played Limerick in the league. I remember the first ball that went in between Arngallane and the fullback. And like a fullback, if the first ball coming in on top of Arngallane, you know, you're certainly not going to go up and trying to catch it. You're going to mind the house, and ball dropped in the goal. So I'd imagine they've looked at all of that. Yeah, I'd be expecting big things from Galway this year, especially the squad they have, how good they are, and I suppose they've been serious contenders in the last 2 to 3 years. And if you add Henry to that, sure, that must improve the whole setup. So I'd be watching Galway probably with one eye all the time this year, because I think they're going to be good.
Yeah, I suppose everyone is expecting Kilkenny to win in Mullingar against Westmeath this weekend. But Kieran, as a guy who, you know, you played several positions, but haven't played centre-back plenty over the years, would you not be concerned that there's still question marks over who will play number 6 for Kilkenny this year? Could be Paddy Deegan, could be Richie Reid, maybe someone else.
I wouldn't actually, because I suppose the modern centre-back now, I suppose effectively, really, your 5 and 6 and 7 at any stage should be able to put 6 in their back, really, if you want him to play 6. That's the way it's gone. No different than your full back line. 2 and 4 should be automatically able to split in to 3. So that's what you're doing. I wouldn't see that being a major problem. And yeah, and you know, going back to what Richie was saying, yeah, he was running every player. You know, Richie had a serious pair of pins. You know, I suppose when you're looking at someone who's serious pins, who's not asking the question, taking on a player, then you're scratching the back of your head. But yeah, I don't think Kilkenny will have a problem with 6. I suppose it's great to see Kilkenny kind of coming back again. You know, they're in the mix again, and you know, I think this year, actually, the championship this year, I think genuinely, and you know, usually people say this, I think it could be the great championship, but I think it could be exceptional, because most teams now are up to the pitch. They're up at the pitch with the strength and conditioning. They appear to be up at the pitch with the type of hurling that needs to be implemented. They're up at the pitch what they need to do to prevent the opposition from implementing their game. So I genuinely feel it, and not only said that, you know, the water break also was gone. So you're going to have a constant flow of 35 minutes of hurling, a break, and another constant 35 minutes of the second half. So I'm looking forward to the championship this year. I have a funny feeling it could be a right one.
Yeah, Richie, when I watched in Thurles, Tipperary against Kilkenny during the league, I thought to myself, neither of these teams is going anywhere this year. They look like they're caught between 2 game plans. They look like they weren't particularly good at it. But, you know, Kilkenny have scored 11 goals in 6 league games. TJ Reid is back training, as far as we know. Owen Cody will only get better. So maybe they're not too badly off.
No, listen, like as I said earlier in the show, Shane, like at the beginning of the year, I would have kind of said to myself that Kilkenny are in a rebuilding process similar to Tipperary. But I suppose, having looked at the league, you know, they've found a couple of players, the Mikey Carey's and David Blanchfield, you know, and I'd probably, in my eyes, they're probably favourites to win Leinster at this moment in time. Now, look, that could all change after Wexford Park Saturday night when we see Galway. Big thing for Kilkenny is they have to travel to Salt Hill and to Parnell Park, which for me are going to be 2 massive games. You know, people are saying Kilkenny have got I suppose the nice start to the championship in a way when they have Westmeath and Laois in the first 2 games. I'm not so sure about that either. You know, because the big test is going to come against Galway in the 3rd round, and are they going to be battle hardened? Are they going to be tested? I'm not so sure, but definitely, look, they're going into the championship in a good place. You know, I don't think they would have been upset coming out of Páirc Uí Chaoimh after the Cork game, but the way they started that game, they have to take great credit for that, you know, and great confidence from that as well, you know, to keep that going as the championship goes on. So certainly, look, I think, as I said, if they can win Leinster, they're 70 minutes from an All-Ireland final, and no team want to play Kilkenny, you know, even though they mightn't, you know, be the team that they were of old. they're a new team now, and you know that black and amber jersey will always have that fear factor. You know, so hopefully, look, I'd be quietly confident, you know, but we'll know more probably in a couple of weeks, you know, than we will over the next 2 weekends.
Yeah, and like
Richie,
they do have those. Yeah, go ahead there.
I just wanted to ask Richie, did you get a feeling during the latter stages of this year's league that it didn't appear to be 100 miles away from championship hurling?
Yeah, I did, because I believe teams are building, Kieran, and you know, and I think the likes of the Kilkenny, the Corks, the Waterfords, they're ready to peak now, I think, you know, at this moment in time. And I suppose that's probably what the Galways, the Limericks, you know, have been aiming towards as well. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think this could be a savage championship, and I think especially with the 3 games this weekend, more so, you know, the Galway Wexford, Waterford Tip, and the Cork Limerick, like 3 huge games to get the hurling championship started. And I think we're in for 3, you know, rip roaring games, and that's not taken from the Kilkenny and the Dublin game either. But definitely it's I think if teams aren't ready to peak this weekend, they're going to put themselves under savage pressure to try and qualify for the latter stages of the championship.
Yeah, Richie, we've seen Killian Buckley work his way back into the team. He's not that old. I think he's only 29, but he's had a lot of injuries. Wally Walsh has had a bit of a revival too. But I'm wondering, what's the plan with Richie Hogan? I mean, he wasn't even been brought in the All-Ireland semi-final last year during normal time. He did get brought in during extra time. He's a few months younger than Patrick Horgan. He's probably one of the most talented hurlers of a generation. He was just on the bench once during the league. Like, is there a plan with him? Is there a chance that he could be an unused sub? And, you know, that wouldn't be a great way for such a great player to finish out his career.
Yeah, I suppose, look, Shane, it is a possibility. I'm not sure if he's in Brian's plans. Personally, he'd definitely be in mine, you know, for his ability, you know. And look, we all know, and I think Richie knows himself, he's not a 70-minute player anymore, you know, but certainly 15, 20 minutes, you know, if I was a cornerback or a fullback, I wouldn't like to see Richie Hogan come in on me, you know, with 20 minutes to go after having 50 tough minutes behind me. So, you know, from that point of view, I'd love to see Richie involved. You know, we saw some touches of brilliance last year when he was involved, or it could have been the year before, actually. Sorry, you know. So I'd love to say, yeah, there is a place and there is a plan for him, but at this moment in time, I genuinely don't know. You know, if there was a plan for him, you would have imagined we would have seen him in the league at some stage. You know, but you know, as again, I could be proved wrong over the next couple of weekends. You know, hopefully he'll get a bit of game time actually over the next couple of weekends. You know, and if he does, and the sharpness is there, well then, you know, you'd be going into a Galway game, you'd be going into a Galway Dublin Wexford game with a fully fit Richie Hogan, and you know, who doesn't want to see that?
Yeah, do you see a role for him, Kieran? You know the way sometimes you can be an older player, and no matter what you do, you know you're not going to get fitter or stronger really in a massive way. There isn't that sort of upward graph with you. Like, is it just the case that he's now in that bracket of an older player?
Yeah, and I suppose similar to Graham Mulcahy, if you like, you know, they're not a million miles away, right? And I suppose my take on that really is, you know, and I can remember at club level, you know, fellas kind of walking away at probably 36 and 37, and you might have got another year out of them. And if they did, there would have been a huge influence, and you could have crossed the line to win a championship. I think even at inter-county level, you know, look at Richie and Graham Mulcahy, and for me, you know, if they're showing a bit of form, you know, and the pins are pretty okay, they don't have to be like Usain Bolt because they've great experience, great heads. Yeah, of course, there's a role there for me, even at that age. You know, as Richie said, whether it's the last 10, last 15, last 20, whatever you think. But I suppose the big one here is, you know, and I suppose we can give our opinions, but the bottom line is what really will determine that is how they're going in training. And for showing some bit of form in training, then both of those players, I'd be ticking them in my box and all.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we all expect them to win this weekend. Dublin are at home to Laois. Rian McBride, he's going to be suspended for this game. He dumped a Laois player more or less on his back in their final league game, so he'll have to serve that suspension here. What are you expecting from the Dubs this year, Richie?
I'm expecting a massive. You know, I would expect Dublin to cause one or maybe two upsets in this year's championship. you know, and I like the fact that they've decided to play their games in Parnell Park as well and not go to Croke Park. You know, like they probably had the option to bring the games to Croke Park if they wanted. Again, similar to Wexford Park, Parnell Park is just, I have no problem saying it's a horrible place to go and play. I don't know what it is about it. I never enjoyed any game in Parnell. Well, we won a Colleges All Ireland in Parnell Park. Sorry, so that's one game I fond memories of. But no, look, I think they have the potential, Shane. Absolutely. Now, I was very disappointed with them the day Kilkenny went to play him in the league in Parnell Park. Very disappointed with that performance. But again, I just got a feeling from it that they were after training extremely hard that week and possibly the Friday night beforehand as well. Matty Kenny is building towards the championship. You know, and as I said, I would expect them to cause one or maybe two upsets in the championship, because they have, without a shadow of a doubt, they have the ability to beat a Galway or a Kilkenny or a Wexford on their day. But it's about getting that performance and putting things together and gelling it all together. You know, and we'll see then what they're made of. But I do think the potential is there, and I think Matty has probably brought in a couple of new players this year as well that are going to add that little bit extra to it as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing Dublin. You know, Laois going up, travelling to Parnell Park, you know, is Dublin Laois it's always a good battle, you know, but you would expect Dublin to win that. You'd expect Kilkenny to win in Mullingar. And then obviously I went for Wexford in Wexford Park. I'll stand by that. But you know, it's, as I said, it's the next couple of rounds that we're really going to see the championship come alive.
Yeah, Kieran, what do you reckon in terms of the Dubs? I mean, Laois beat them a couple of years ago, but once bitten, twice shy, maybe.
Yeah, and funny enough, you know, when Limerick were probably at their strongest 2 or 3 years ago, when teams were kind of scratching their head trying to figure out how do we stop this, what do we need to implement ourselves. And I was going to a lot of league games, and actually the one team that I saw probably for the first time that was able to stunt them was Dublin above Parnell Park in how they set up. So they have exceptional defenders, and I suppose I'm looking at Dublin and I'm looking at the underachieving they're done for the last number of years through Ger Cunningham and now, but yet they appear to show glimpses of brilliance, but they don't appear to be consistent. And you know, for some reason or another, they should be hotly tipped more often than we're speaking about because of their ability, potential, and I suppose how big the county is. So, you know, I don't know. I can't pinpoint it. I don't know. Is this Matty Kinney's third or fourth year? I'm not too sure. But, you know, from an outside looking in at him, you're kind of frustrated because you know they're probably even capable of more if there was a bit of small more self-belief or probably a few more